Hello and welcome. Today, we delve into the depths of one of history's most profound technological upheavals, the moment when the ocean itself betrayed the once invincible German U-boat fleet, revealing secrets that forever changed underwater warfare. Imagine a dark, turbulent spring morning in 1941, 500 nautical miles south of Greenland, when a young midshipman aboard U-557 hears a sudden, metallic ping. A sharp, unnatural echo that shakes the entire vessel and shatters the illusion of underwater invisibility. Could it be a glitch, or the ocean's first sign that it's no longer a safe haven? Decades later, Herbert Wierer would describe that sound as a church bell tolling their final farewell, an ominous herald that the Allies had developed technology powerful enough to pierce the darkness of the sea. What if the ocean's depths, once thought impenetrable, could be seen through with astonishing clarity? How did a simple device like early sonar, primitive and limited, transform into an unstoppable weapon capable of tracking submarines hundreds of meters beneath the surface? Could the Germans have foreseen that their years of stealth would be undone by these tiny, penetrating sound waves? The central question then becomes, if the ocean once shielded the U-boat fleet, what was it that finally tore that shield apart? The answer lies in a relentless technological revolution, advances in sonar, radar, and electronic detection, that turned the silent hunter into the hunted, stripping away the illusion of invisibility that had long protected them. And I promise you, in this video, we will trace that journey from initial confidence, through terrifying breakthroughs, to devastating losses, unraveling how a secret war beneath the waves was won not just by courage, but by science, innovation, and the relentless pursuit of detection. So, as we begin, prepare to explore the moment when the ocean's silence was broken forever, and the silent war of the Atlantic was forever transformed. The most dangerous secrets are revealed, right now. On the 25th of May, in the dark and turbulent waters of the North Atlantic, approximately 500 nautical miles south of Cape Farewell, Greenland, a young midshipman aboard the German submarine U-557 found himself gripped by a mixture of tense anticipation and mounting dread. His hands, trembling slightly, clung to the handles of the periscope as he strained to make sense of the signals and sights around him. However, his tremor was not driven by fear of the enemy lurking above the water or the dangers that were ever present beneath the waves, but rather by a chilling, inexplicable noise that had just resonated within the steel confines of their vessel, a sound that would haunt him for years to come. The ominous noise was a sudden, metallic ping, a sharp, unnatural echo, a sound that reverberated through every compartment of the U-557, unsettling the crew and reverberating as if announcing a grim prophecy. This strange, piercing sound had struck the submarine's hull with a force that defied their expectations, shaking the very fabric of their underwater sanctuary. The incident immediately etched itself into the submarine's history, a mysterious disturbance that hinted at a new and terrifying reality. For the first time, the ocean had betrayed its previous role as an impenetrable barrier, revealing secrets that had long protected their stealthy operations. Herbert Wierer, a young officer on board and later a seasoned veteran, would later record in his personal journal that the discovery, made decades after the war's end, was unlike anything he and his comrades had trained for or imagined. In his writings, he described the moment as a sound akin to a church bell tolling their final farewell, a sinister herald announcing that their unseen adversaries above the waves had finally succeeded in locating them. The realization chilled him. The Allies had developed technologies powerful enough to pierce through the darkness of the sea, making the waters no longer a safe refuge for the clandestine U-boat fleet. For nearly 3 years, the crews of German submarines, often called U-boats operated with a sense of impunity, confidently believing that their submerged vessels remained hidden and invincible beneath the ocean's surface. They had been conditioned to think that when they submerged, they disappeared from enemy detection entirely, cloaked by the depth and darkness of the seas in as complete a shadow as the night veiling a surface raider. This perception had fostered a false sense of security among the submariners, rooted in their understanding that the ocean's depths could serve as an effective shield against the advanced but primitive detection tools of their enemies. But the events of that spring morning in 1941 shattered those illusions. The young Veerer and his crew of 48 men aboard U-557 confronted a stark and terrifying truth. The ocean no longer concealed them. The Allies had advanced their technological capabilities beyond the wildest dreams of the U-boat sailors. They possessed tools that could see through thousands of meters of water, revealing the hidden vessels dwelling beneath the surface. What none of them fully grasped at that moment was that the single, sharp ping, initially perceived as a mere anomaly, was actually the opening act of a revolutionary shift in underwater warfare, a symphony of technological breakthroughs that would forever alter the nature of submarine combat. Over the course of the subsequent 4 years, German U-boat crews would undergo a relentless and systematic process of psychological erosion, as the once dominant wolf packs faced increasingly sophisticated and lethal detection systems. The early days saw rudimentary sonar devices, but these evolved rapidly into highly precise and effective sonar tools capable of tracking submarines with astonishing accuracy. The very mathematics of underwater combat was rewritten, not through the calculation of torpedo trajectories alone, but through the complex science of sound waves, a realm that would expose the quiet hunters to devastating destruction on an unprecedented scale. This marked the beginning of the end for German submarine supremacy in the Atlantic. The decline of the U-boat fleet's dominance had been unfolding for years, but its full realization commenced with these technological revelations. The path toward this turning point stretched back over 2 decades, to the final moments of the First World War when efforts to counter the ruthless U-boats had first begun to take shape. During those vexed final months of the Great War, British and French scientists, desperately seeking ways to defend Britain against the Kriegsmarine's undersea juggernaut, embarked on pioneering experiments in underwater sound detection. The Royal Navy's Anti-Submarine Division, operating from cutting-edge shore-based laboratories, developed the earliest rudimentary sonar devices, what would later be famously known as hydrophones, in the year 1918. These early instruments were primitive, often inconsistent, but they laid the groundwork for a revolutionary technology. Unfortunately, the armistice came before these innovative systems could be deployed widely or in meaningful numbers, and so, only a handful of U-boats in the entire conflict were ever credited with being detected by this nascent technology. Nonetheless, the seed of what would become the device known as an oscillator, a small, finely crafted disc made from quartz crystal, played a critical role in early underwater detection systems by transforming electrical signals into sound waves capable of traveling through water. These oscillators had to be carefully suspended just above the side of the ship to generate the necessary sound waves for detection purposes. Under optimal conditions, the range of this early sonar was limited to approximately 3,500 yards, which was a respectable distance at the time but still far from perfect. It is important to understand that this system was designed solely to identify the direction and proximity of objects beneath the water's surface. It was incapable of measuring the depth of a target. The people operating these systems, often using headphones to listen carefully to the underwater environment, faced the complex task of differentiating genuine submarine echoes from a variety of natural underwater noises. These included echoes bouncing off marine life such as whales and schools of fish, as well as disturbances caused by ship wakes or thermoclines, layers of water with different temperatures, that could distort sound transmission. Despite these challenges, by the year of 1939, the Royal Navy had developed such unwavering confidence in their ASDICH equipment that senior naval officials believed the submarine threat had been effectively neutralized. Every destroyer in the Royal Navy fleet was equipped with this sonar technology, and hundreds of trained operators were educated in its use through specialized training schools. Their extensive training programs produced a steady stream of personnel well versed in interpreting the complex acoustic signals. Naval strategic plans for the early stages of the war assumed that convoys protected by ships fitted with ASDICH would be safe from most submarine attacks, resulting in very few losses during escort missions. However, such optimism proved to be dangerously misplaced, a tragic misjudgment that would become painfully clear soon after hostilities commenced. On the 3rd of September of 1939, mere hours after Britain formally declared war on Germany, the passenger liner Athenia was tragically torpedoed west of Ireland by the German U-boat designated U-30, resulting in the loss of more than 117 lives. This event marked the true beginning of the Battle of the Atlantic, and it was at this point that German submarine commanders quickly realized that the formidable-looking British anti-submarine defenses were significantly less effective than what was previously believed. The commanders, Captain Otto Kretschmer Gauprien and Joachim Schepke, led their submarines on highly effective patrols, sinking ship after ship with devastating success while suffering only minimal damage themselves. Admiral Karl Donitz, who commanded the German U-boat fleet, watched these results with a sense of satisfaction, as his submarines achieved what would be known as the first happy time, a period during which German submariners operated with a carefully cultivated belief in their apparent invisibility beneath the waves. Prior to the war, naval training emphasized a doctrine that suggested a submerged U-boat was virtually undetectable by enemy sensors. Instructors explained that the vastness of the ocean absorbed and scattered sound waves, effectively masking a submarine's movement. Hydrophones, underwater listening devices, might be able to detect propeller noise from a surfaced submarine, but when a boat was running on electric motors beneath the water, moving silently and submerged, it was considered a ghost that was almost impossible to find. This doctrine of invisibility was deeply ingrained throughout all levels of U-boat operation. Feldwebel Wolfgang Hirschfeld, the senior radio operator aboard the U-109, documented his thoughts in a secret diary, written in real time during patrols. He recalled, "We believed that the enemy relied solely on the same listening equipment from the last war, implying a misconception that technological progress had stayed static. We were told their hydrophones could only detect loud machinery noise. As long as we remained silent after diving, we thought we were safe." This unwavering confidence turned out to be a dangerous illusion that would soon be shattered by the reality of new technological developments. The first German U-boat crew to encounter active sonar technology faced a shocking and almost existential turning point. When an ASDICH pulse, the sound wave emitted by the sonar, hit the submerged hull of a U-boat, it produced a very distinctive and alarming noise inside the vessel. Survivors vividly described the sensation as similar to dropping dried peas into a tin can, with a rapid series of metallic clicks that grew louder as the hunting ship drew nearer, revealing the submarine's position with remarkable precision. Unlike the steady, droning hum of ship propellers, which could be heard through hydrophones without specific directionality, the sonar ping was an unmistakably artificial sound, sharp, clear, and unmistakably focused, highlighting the precise direction of the attacking vessel. It was a terrifying revelation for the submarine crews, who had believed themselves hidden. Lieutenant Herbert Werner, serving as the watch officer aboard the U-557 during his first war patrol in May of 1941, experienced his icy baptism under sonar detection while stalking a convoy south of Greenland. Decades later, the haunting footage captured by the camera revealed a stark, frozen moment in time, a silent witness to the tense confrontation beneath the ocean's surface. The destroyer's ASDIC, a cutting-edge sonar system for its era, had pinpointed our submarine's position precisely at periscope depth, the metallic pinging intensifying, echoing through the dark waters. Starting as a faint, rhythmic sound, the signals rapidly grew louder, more insistent, like a relentless drumbeat of impending danger. One after another, each ping hammered against our steel hull, reverberating through the entire submarine. Every crew member at his station instinctively froze, their senses heightened with the weight of the situation. It was profoundly clear that the enemy vessel holding the technological advantage above us knew exactly where we were, stripping away our concealment and rendering us vulnerable. The tables had turned in a matter of seconds. The hunter had unwittingly become the hunted, an abrupt reversal that would forever be etched into their memories. This rapid transformation from predator to prey unfolded in the blink of an eye. Among those on board was Vera, a young sailor just 22 years old, barely 6 months removed from the rigorous training of the Naval Academy. He watched his commanding officer's face shift, from the confident, in-control expression of a seasoned hunter to a more serious, alert demeanor of a survivor assessing the worst-case scenario. Captain Lodent Autorpulsion, a seasoned veteran who had successfully led a multitude of patrols and engagements, immediately issued the order: dive to a depth of 200 meters. The crew responded with practiced precision, each man knowing exactly what to do in such moments of crisis. Yet, despite their professionalism, they all understood the gravity of that persistent pinging. Their primary advantage, their supposed invisibility, had just been compromised by a form of technology that was still relatively unfamiliar to them, an unsettling realization that changed the dynamics of the hunt instantly. On the British destroyer, the operator responsible for the ASDIC system was likely a young man, no older than Vera himself. Despite his youth, he wielded an advantage far beyond mere experience or skill. His sophisticated equipment could penetrate the vast ocean itself, painting acoustic images of objects hundreds of yards away with remarkable accuracy and detail. The system transmitted signals at an astonishing rate, 14,000 pulses per second, well beyond the threshold of human hearing, yet its effects were deafeningly clear to those listening. When these sound waves collided with the submarine's steel hull, they were reflected back like echoes, captured by hydrophones meticulously mounted beneath the destroyer's keel. The process was straightforward but precise. The system recorded the exact time delays of these echoes, which in turn translated into distances. By analyzing the arrival times and the direction from which the signals returned, the destroyer's crew could steadily refine their estimate of our submarine's bearing. Every minute movement of the vessel was tracked with increasing certainty, closing the net tighter with each passing second. What ensued was a relentless, grueling saga, 7 hours of depth-charge attacks that shook the very foundation of our submerged craft. The captain ordered us to dive to 200 meters, engaging silent running to reduce noise and help us evade detection. We moved slowly, at a crawl, minimum speed, trying to slip away under the relentless watch of our pursuers. Overhead, the destroyer's screws, massive propellers, whirred and thrummed, their ominous sound punctuated by the splashes of depth charges detonating nearby. We counted the seconds between the explosions, desperately trying to gauge the distance to the death zones that threatened to engulf us. Each depth charge explosion sent violent shock waves rippling through the submarine's hull, causing shudders and rattles that seemed to shake the very bones within. Chips of paint flaked off from bulkheads, and light bulbs shattered from the intensity of the blasts. Men suffered injuries, some bleeding from ears and noses, while the vessel itself groaned under the immense pressure from the deep. Inside, time appeared to slow as every decision and action became a struggle against the relentless assault of sound and pressure. Amidst the chaos, the captain issued commands to shut down all non-essential systems, a measure designed to minimize noise and maximize our chances of survival. Electric motors were brought to a bare minimum. The vessel moved through the dark waters at barely 2 knots, an agonizingly slow crawl. Every movement, every creak of metal, was a potential giveaway, so the crew moved with meticulous care. Even a dropped wrench, a slammed hatch, or footsteps heavy with anxiety could betray our hiding spot. The men sat or stood at their stations in near silence, breathing in the increasingly foul, stale air, their senses heightened by fear and fatigue. Listening intently to the circling predator above, every sound potentially deadly. Vera committed every detail he could observe to memory. These would later fill pages of his memoir, a record of endurance, desperation, and the fight for survival. Inside it had circulated through dozens of pairs of lungs, each breath adding to the already complex history embedded in its very fabric. Overhead, a relentless destroyer loomed like an ominous shadow, steadfast and unwavering in its pursuit. The operator aboard the Asdich sonar system maintained a firm lock on his target, unwilling to relinquish contact despite the mounting tension. Every few moments, the persistent metallic pinging intensified, signaling that the hunter was steadily closing in for another deadly strike. As the tension mounted to almost unbearable levels, the crew standardized their response. They clenched tightly to the sturdy stanchions, pressed their bodies against the thick bulkheads, bracing themselves for what might come next. Suddenly, the water erupted with splashes, the unmistakable, horrifying sounds of depth charges plunging into the depths below. The crew's ears counted the explosions, 1, 2, 3, and sometimes as many as 5. Occasionally, the pattern shifted, with 10 charges raining down in rapid succession, each one sending shockwaves through the submarine's fragile structure. The wait between the assaults seemed endless, each second stretching unbearably long. They knew the timings well: 7 seconds if the charge was set to explode at 100 meters, 12 seconds for 200, and 20 seconds if at 300 meters. When the inevitable blasts erupted, the entire vessel trembled violently, almost lifted from its position as the closer detonations rocked the submarine. Men were flung off their feet, clutching desperately to whatever was within reach. The hull responded with ominous groans, springs and seams popping as the immense pressure exerted itself. Fragments of cork insulation rained down from the ceilings, while electrical sparks crackled from damaged control panels. Leaks appeared as thin jets of seawater began to spray through cracks under immense pressure, each a sign of the pressure hull's stress. Damage control parties scrambled furiously, plugging cracks with wooden plugs, tightening bolts on pipe joints, and reinforcing the weakened frames to prevent catastrophic failure. For nearly 7 hours, the U-557 had plunged deeper and deeper, surpassing 220 meters, the vessel's original crush depth, until it reached a daunting depth of 280 meters. At such depths, the hull was undertaking a slow but relentless contraction, rivets groaning under the strain and seams weeping water. Yet, Pulsion, the commanding officer, was confident in his vessel's resilience. He understood that German engineering had built specific safety margins into the submarine's design, allowing it to endure incredible pressures. Still, he also knew that surfacing would risk detection and, ultimately, destruction. The only choice was to keep the boat at great depths, maintaining silence, awaiting the destroyer's fuel supply to dwindle or its patience to run out. After what felt like an eternity, the incessant pinging finally ceased, giving a brief respite. As the noise of the destroyer's propeller faded into the distance, either because the captain lost confidence in his sonar contact or because he had exhausted his fuel reserves and needed to return to the convoy, U-557 lay in the silence of the deep. The crew waited still for about 2 more hours, submerged beneath the surface, then carefully began ascending. When the submarine finally broke the surface after nearly 9 hours beneath the waves, men hurried onto the conning tower, desperate for fresh air. Many gasped deeply, overwhelmed by the sudden influx of oxygen, some vomiting from the shock of the change. Others simply stood quietly, faces turned upwards, savoring the rare moment of survival amid the endless vastness of the Atlantic. Yet, U-557 had survived, just as many other German submarines had in those early war years. The Allied ASDIC operators aboard escort ships, though capable of detecting U-boats like the U-boat, faced significant limitations. The system was far from perfect. Its blind spot lay within a close range, under only 200 yards, where the transmitted sound pulses and their echoes merged into an indistinct mass, creating a shadow zone during critical moments when the submarine was closest to attack. This meant depth charges had to be dropped further astern, often after the submarine was no longer detectable, giving clever commanders a fleeting window to execute evasive maneuvers. Furthermore, the ASDIC system was particularly ineffective in turbulent sea conditions. Variations in water temperature called thermoclines, layers of different temperature, would bend sound waves, forming shadow zones where submarines could hide undetected. Experienced U-boat commanders learned how to exploit this by diving beneath these thermal layers, rendering Allied sonar beams useless. They mastered the subtle art of silent running, shutting down all non-essential machinery and moving at very slow speeds, making their vessels exceedingly difficult to detect and track in hostile waters. The meticulous reduction of their propellers' noise ensured that no cavitation was created, which was crucial in maintaining stealth. Even a single person walking with excessive heaviness could risk revealing the position of a submarine. During the period of 1940 and 1941, such tactical considerations allowed German submarines to sustain operational effectiveness despite the increasingly sophisticated detection capabilities of Allied sonar systems. The experience gained through these years clearly demonstrated that the learning curve favored seasoned commanders. For instance, individuals like Wehrer, who successfully survived their initial encounter with ASDIC detection, began to analyze and understand the weaknesses of the emerging listening technology. It was observed that when multiple escort ships operated simultaneously, each transmitting on different frequencies, the resulting acoustic interference created a form of confusion that hampered enemy detection efforts. Moreover, the Germans developed strategies to conceal their submarines within the ambient noise produced by the convoy itself. The collective sound of 50 merchant ships, their engines and propellers all running, formed a natural noise barrier that masked the signature of the submarine, making it far more difficult for enemy sonar to distinguish the submerged vessel from the background clamor. Fundamentally different from the Allied approach, the German underwater detection systems primarily relied on passive listening devices rather than active sonar technology. German engineers designed complex arrays of hydrophones known as the Grinnhorscharret, or group listening devices, which became standard on the U-boat fleet from 1935 onward. Each array consisted of 48 hydrophones mounted along the sides of the vessel's bow, capable of detecting individual ships at distances up to 20 kilometers, and large convoys at ranges approaching 100 kilometers. Despite these impressive detection capabilities, the bearings derived from these arrays lacked the precision needed for accurate torpedo attacks. This approach to underwater detection was a reflection of the overarching German strategic doctrine. U-boats were considered hunters rather than prey, their primary mission being to locate convoy formations rather than avoid detection themselves. As a result, the Germans invested heavily in advanced passive listening equipment designed explicitly to find targets. Their assumption was that adversaries would similarly rely on passive systems, which led to a focus on developing highly sensitive detection arrays. However, the Germans did not regard the possibility of active sonar technology, that is, ships emitting sound waves and then listening for echoes to locate submarines, as a credible threat at the time. In fact, it was considered somewhat insane to rely solely on reflected sound waves for underwater detection. Commander Herbert Schulzer, who was in charge of the U-48, made an entry in his patrol report from October of 1940, noting, "The British anti-submarine measures remain inadequate. Their listening devices compel us to make noise. When we operate silently, detection becomes impossible." This assessment was often echoed among U-boat commanders and crew, who believed that silence invariably equated to safety. Unfortunately for the Germans, this optimistic outlook would be catastrophically incorrect, as technological developments in Allied detection methods soon proved. The year of 1942 marked a turning point in the Atlantic theater. Despite initial failures to recognize the shifting pattern of warfare, the Germans faced increasingly severe losses. In February of that year, Admiral Donitz's U-boat flotilla, designated U-boot, began operations off the American East Coast, exploiting the United States' glaring unpreparedness for submarine warfare. This phase, often called the Second Happy Time, saw U-boats silhouetted against the brightly lit shores, sailing independently without escorts, and sinking ships by the hundreds. The crews of these submarines dubbed this period the American shooting season, reflecting their aggressive success. Meanwhile, at the same time, British and American scientists were undertaking radical innovations in anti-submarine technology, fundamentally altering the battlefield. In September of 1940, Britain transferred ASDIC technology, a sophisticated active sonar system, to the United States without any charge, recognizing the necessity of collaborative effort to develop effective countermeasures swiftly. American engineers at the Naval Research Laboratory in Washington began working in tandem with their British counterparts to evolve a new form of underwater detection. This system, which they called Sonar, an acronym derived from sound navigation and ranging, marked a significant step forward. By early 1942, these intertwined British-American research initiatives had begun producing rapid advancements in detection technology, significantly shifting the dynamics of submarine warfare. The development and deployment of sonar technology during wartime marked an extraordinary milestone in collaborative scientific and military effort, exemplifying how international cooperation could accelerate innovation in critical moments. British scientists, committed to this cause, traveled across the Atlantic to Washington bearing a wealth of detailed blueprints, comprehensive operational manuals, and even actual ASDIC equipment, equipment that had been carefully extracted from Royal Navy destroyers. Their mission was clear: to share everything they knew so that American engineers could adapt, refine, and mass-produce this crucial technology. Once in the United States, these skilled engineers meticulously analyzed each component, examining the intricate design of the British systems. They then applied American industrial techniques, known for their efficiency and scalability, to enhance the hardware's performance and facilitate large-scale production. Initially, the British had assembled transducers, devices that convert electrical signals into sound waves, by hand using quartz crystals, producing only limited quantities due to the labor-intensive process. In contrast, American engineers innovated by developing magnetostrictive transducers that utilized nickel tubes, which could be manufactured in vast numbers, greatly increasing the availability of sonar equipment for the Allied forces. Meanwhile, the British employed sleek, streamlined domes made of protective materials engineered to withstand the harsh ocean environment. These domes served as protective coverings for their transducers, reducing water turbulence and noise that could interfere with sonar signals. The Americans, meanwhile, experimented with spherical shapes for these protective domes, believing that such geometries could improve acoustic performance by optimizing the transmission and reception of sound waves underwater. These adaptations were part of a broader effort to improve the core hardware. But the collaboration extended well beyond mere hardware innovations. Royal Navy officers generously shared countless years of operational experience with their American counterparts. This exchange of knowledge covered a wide range of topics, from understanding how temperature layers in the ocean, known as thermoclines, affected sonar beam propagation, to how seasoned submarine commanders exploited dead zones, or areas where sonar signals are weak or obscured. They also trained U.S. anti-submarine warfare (ASW) personnel on how to distinguish genuine submarine echoes from false signals caused by environmental noise or marine life. This transfer of tactical knowledge dramatically compressed the typical learning curve. What ordinarily might have taken years of trial and error was distilled into months of intensive instruction. As a result, American forces quickly gained the ability to implement effective anti-submarine tactics, substantially closing the technological gap that might have otherwise persisted. By the middle of the year 1942, American shipyards had incorporated sonar systems into every destroyer, destroyer escort, and corvette rolling off their assembly lines. The sheer volume of production, coordinated meticulously by the United States Maritime Commission, ensured that all equipment adhered to stringent standards. This standardization was vital. Parts could be easily swapped between ships, crew members trained on one vessel could seamlessly operate another, and a consistent tactical doctrine was fostered across the entire fleet. Such uniformity not only simplified logistics and maintenance but also enhanced operational effectiveness. The scale of American industrial efforts transformed sonar from a specialized British naval technology into a ubiquitous weapons system employed across Allied navies. Three major technological advances during this period turned sonar into a highly effective weapon capable of hunting and destroying submarines with deadly precision. The first was the development of power rotation systems, which allowed the transducer heads, devices responsible for emitting and receiving sound waves, to scan through significantly wider arcs with speed and agility. Early models relied on manual hand cranks, demanding operators to physically turn the transducer, a slow and laborious process. American engineers replaced these with electric motors capable of sweeping through a 90-degree arc within seconds, enabling escort ships to scrutinize their entire forward hemisphere, from port to starboard, in the span of what previously would have been a much narrower and more limited search. The second critical innovation involved the physical design of the protective domes, or fairings, covering the transducers. Early installations used canvas covers, which created turbulent water flow at higher speeds, generating noise that interfered with sonar signals and hampered search effectiveness. In response, engineers designed streamlined steel domes, carefully shaped after wind tunnel testing and hydrodynamic analysis, that allowed water to flow smoothly around the transducer even when ships cruised at speeds up to 20 knots, compared to the earlier limit of around 15 knots. This upgrade allowed escort vessels to accelerate and close in on submarines rapidly without losing contact, significantly improving their chances of successful engagement. The third major enhancement was the incorporation of dual-frequency systems, which, although still under refinement at this stage, promised to offer a new level of sophistication in submarine detection by enabling sonar to operate effectively across different acoustic environments and target types. Collectively, these advances transformed sonar from a basic detection device into a versatile, lethal tool in the anti-submarine arsenal, dramatically increasing the Allies' capability to counter underwater threats as the Battle of the Atlantic raged on. The technological advances achieved by sonar systems operating at both 14 and 30 kHz frequencies marked a significant turning point in underwater detection capabilities. Lower frequency signals, capable of traveling vast distances through the dense medium of seawater, greatly extended the range at which submarines could be detected. However, this advantage came with a notable drawback. The bearings or directional information they provided were somewhat crude and imprecise, making pinpoint targeting difficult. Conversely, high-frequency sonar pulses produced much sharper and more detailed echoes, allowing for precise target identification and location. Yet, these higher frequencies were quickly absorbed and diminished as they propagated through seawater, limiting their effective range. By intelligently combining these two frequencies, submarine hunters could exploit the strengths of each, initially employing low-frequency signals to detect and track a vessel from a considerable distance, and then switching to high-frequency pulses as they closed the distance, to achieve pinpoint accuracy in targeting. This dual-frequency approach substantially improved operational efficiency. Some advanced sonar systems of the period even featured automatic frequency switching, which seamlessly alternated between the two, thereby providing operators with the best of both worlds in a single sweeping detection cycle. Among the most revolutionary developments was the introduction of the Type 147 ASDIC system, which was developed and deployed in 1943. Unlike earlier systems that only provided two-dimensional localization, bearing and distance, the Type 147 could track submarines in 3 dimensions. This breakthrough allowed the Allies to determine not only a vessel's horizontal position and range, but also its depth. As a result, escort ships could deploy depth charges with extraordinary precision, significantly increasing the likelihood of a successful attack. This technological leap meant that the once private underwater sanctuaries, where submarines believed they could evade detection by diving deep below the surface, were rapidly diminishing. German submarine crews, or U-boat crews, began noticing an alarming increase in detection rates they could not explain. Oberleutnant Wehrer, who was promoted to first watch officer aboard the U-boat U-230 in late 1942, was among those who observed these changes firsthand. In early 1941, when submarines attempted to dive deep and remain silent, escort ships typically lost contact within about an hour. By the year 1943, however, official records and crew accounts indicated that sonar contacts could last much longer, 5, 6, or even 7 hours, making survival increasingly difficult for the submerged vessels. These escorts appeared to always know their exact depth, executing depth charge attacks precisely at the submarine's position. Sometimes, the explosions seemed almost prescient. It was as if the escorts could see them, predicting where they would be. Oberleutnant Wörer's observations reflected a harsh reality that German naval intelligence was slow to understand. The Allies had not merely upgraded their sonar equipment, but had fundamentally revolutionized underwater detection technology. The capabilities of the Type 147 ASDIC to simultaneously track targets in 3 dimensions rendered previous German tactics incompatible, especially those developed against earlier, 2-dimensional systems. Diving deep underground no longer guaranteed safety, as escorts could still maintain contact and track their position accurately. Changing course no longer guaranteed escape, nor did silent running ensure invisibility. The psychological toll on submarine crews was profound. Unlike surface engagements where ships could visually identify and fight the enemy, submarine crews under attack could only remain silent and wait, helpless, as destroyers methodically hunted them. The relentless sound of sonar, pings echoing through the hull, became a harbinger of doom. Each ping was a grim reminder that an escort ship was calculating their precise location, with a certainty that left little room for hope. They knew that depth charges were being set to explode at exactly the right depth, with the potential for annihilation poised to strike at any moment. The sonar's steady, rhythmic ping 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 transformed into a continuous and maddening noise. Veterans of underwater combat described it as akin to fingernails scraping across a slate, a sound amplified 1,000-fold and reverberating through the submarine's steel shell. This cacophony penetrated every compartment, from the forward torpedo room to the engine spaces behind. Escaping its omnipresent presence was impossible. The noise persisted relentlessly, echoing within the confined spaces, creating an oppressive atmosphere of dread. Some crew members attempted to drown out the sound by stuffing cotton into their ears, hoping to muffle the relentless noise, but the sound waves traveled through the hull itself, through the deck plates, into the air, and through every space within the vessel. It was an omnipresent force that offered no respite, no matter how much soldiers tried to block it out. The inescapable, unceasing noise was more than just a sonic assault. It was a symbol of the looming threat and inevitable destruction, embodying the terrifying reality that death could arrive in seconds. The splash of depth charges detonating overhead, accompanied by the relentless, deafening pinging, created a symphony of doom for the submarine's crew. Echoing their helplessness, every sailor aboard a U-boat was well versed in the fundamental principles of physics, especially those relevant to underwater acoustics. The propagation of sound through water occurs at approximately 1,500 meters per second, a fact that was crucial for submarine warfare. When an ASIC operator detected an echo bouncing back after transmitting a sound pulse, typically about 2 seconds later, this interval indicated that the enemy vessel or object was roughly 1,500 meters away, since the sound had traveled to the target and back again. Using this simple principle of division, they could quickly estimate the range to the target. Furthermore, the direction from which the returning echo originated provided the bearing, guiding the submarine's course. By the early 1940s, advancements in the 3-dimensional ASDIC system allowed operators to determine not just horizontal bearing but also depth, by analyzing the angle at which sound waves reflected from the target, thus offering a comprehensive 3-dimensional picture of the enemy's position. In such a combat environment, the submarine's position was constantly exposed and fully known to its pursuers on the surface ships above. There was nowhere for the submarine to hide. Every movement was monitored, every sound recorded. Feldwebel Hirschfeld, whose U-109 had managed to survive multiple depth-charge attacks throughout the early 1940s, documented in his diary the increasing terror and psychological strain faced by the crews. The relentless pings, constant sonar signals, never ceased. They followed the submarine tirelessly, hour after hour, in the suffocating darkness of the ocean depths, as the crew sat silent to conserve dwindling battery power. The atmosphere within the submarine grew increasingly grim. The air became thick and stale, contaminated by rising levels of carbon dioxide from the crew's breathing. Men gasped for breath, their faces pallid from the claustrophobic environment. Yet, despite their discomfort, the sonar pings persisted without pause. The crew knew the enemy was still above, circling like predatory animals, waiting for the right moment to strike. When droplets of water splashed onto the hull, it signaled a depth charge attack. The sailors would count aloud, their voices trembling, 1, 2, 5, 10, corresponding to the number of charges dropped. Then they would brace, waiting anxiously for the anticipated explosions, each one threatening to rupture their fragile vessel, flooding the interior with seawater if successful. Hirschfeld's diary entries from early 1943 vividly recorded the psychological decline of U-boat crews under relentless attack. Men who had once been confident and aggressive warriors became visibly traumatized, consumed by fear and despair. After particularly severe depth-charge barrages, crew members would tremble uncontrollably for hours, their bodies racked with anxiety. Some sailors refused to eat, their stomachs twisted with terror, unable to digest the meager rations. Others sought solace in sleep, desperately trying to escape the relentless danger through unconsciousness. A few broke down completely, some crying openly, others remaining motionless in a state of shock. Recognizing the importance of maintaining morale, the captains endeavored to uphold a semblance of routine and discipline amidst chaos. Daily drills continued unabated, and equipment was meticulously maintained, while watches were diligently stood, to project control and preparedness. Yet, deep down, everyone was acutely aware of the brutal truth. The ocean no longer served as their sanctuary. The technological advantage once held by the Germans, which had made their submarines the most feared weapons of the last war, was being systematically neutralized by new anti-submarine innovations. Advanced sonar, radar, and coordinated air patrols transformed the oceans into lethal traps, turning the hunters into the hunted. The tide of the Battle of the Atlantic had decisively turned by the spring of 1943. That March was a particularly pivotal month, with German U-boats sinking a remarkable number of merchant ships, totaling nearly 700,000 tons, while suffering only a dozen submarines lost. The majority of these sinkings occurred while ships traveled in convoy, the primary strategy used by the Allies to protect vital maritime routes. For 20 days straight, Admiral Donitz's Wolfpack tactics brought U-boats alarmingly close to cutting off Britain's vital supply lines, creating a crisis point that threatened to sever the vital connection between the Old World and the New. Although the Royal Navy's official history later concluded that the Germans never quite succeeded in entirely disrupting the Atlantic supply route, the intense activity in March 1943 marked the peak of U-boat effectiveness. This period represented the climax of their effectiveness rather than a resurgence of dominance. Meanwhile, the technological and tactical balance was shifting in favor of the Allies. Shipyards across the United States and other Allied nations were producing escort vessels, such as destroyer escorts, corvettes, and frigates, at a rate faster than the U-boats could sink them. These new vessels, equipped with more advanced sonar systems and other technological improvements, flooded into the Atlantic en masse, greatly enhancing convoy protection. This relentless industrial output and technological innovation gradually turned during the tense days of May in the year 1943. A new type of long-range Liberator aircraft, equipped with advanced radar technology and sonobuoys, took on a crucial mission in the Atlantic. These aircraft were capable of closing the vast mid-Atlantic gaps, regions previously beyond the reach of land-based aircraft during wartime operations. Their arrival marked a significant shift in the dynamics of submarine warfare. This period is often remembered as Black May for the Marine forces, particularly for the formidable U-boat fleet. The relentless assault by the Allies resulted in the loss of 41 U-boats during this month alone, which represented about a quarter of their operational strength at that time. This staggering figure underscored the harsh reality that the German submarine fleet was facing a crisis of unprecedented proportions. The magnitude of these losses caused significant concern at the highest levels of the Kriegsmarine, leading Admiral Donitz to order a tactical withdrawal of U-boats from the North Atlantic on May 24. In his war diary, he expressed the gravity of the situation, stating, "We are facing a situation where enemy attempts to restrict our operations have succeeded. Their sea and air anti-submarine forces have increased enormously. Our losses have become unsustainable." This candid reflection illustrated the severity of the crisis and the brutal toll the campaign was exacting on the German submariners. The statistical data from this period paints a stark and undeniable picture of the escalating attrition. In the initial 3 weeks of May, a total of 96 U-boats were deployed into the North Atlantic theater. Of these, 41 were destroyed during combat or accidents, a loss rate of approximately 43%, with nearly half of the flotillas never making it back to port. To put this into perspective, the entire year of 1941 had seen only 35 U-boat losses across all causes, including accidents, mechanical failures, and combat. The disparity becomes even more striking when comparing the casualty rates. In just 3 weeks of May, Black May, the U-boat fleet lost more submarines than the entire previous year of early war operations combined. This was an alarming trend that highlighted how the balance of power had shifted dramatically against the Germans. The shipping losses mirrored this despair, with a catastrophic ratio of 12 merchant ships sunk for every U-boat lost. 2 years earlier, this ratio was 10 merchant ships per U-boat per patrol, with the majority of submarines returning safely from their assignments. Now, however, the rate at which submarines were being destroyed surpassed their ability to sink enemy targets, signaling a significant turning point in the Battle of the Atlantic. Behind these grim statistics lay human stories of bravery, peril, and loss. On May 5, the U-boat designated U-463, commanded by Captain Lieutenant Leo Wolfpower, faced a deadly encounter while stalking convoy ONS-5. Under intense sonar detection by the British escort destroyer Vindex, the U-boat was tracked with precision and held in firm contact despite the boat's evasive maneuvers. For 3 desperate hours, Wolfpower deployed every tactic known to German submarine warfare, diving deep, zigzagging course changes, accelerating and decelerating, and deploying bubble decoys in a bid to escape. Despite these efforts, the destroyer's contact remained unbroken. Running low on battery power and taking damage from near-miss depth charges that threatened to flood the submarine, Wolfpower was forced to surface and engage in a desperate stand with the boat's deck gun. The destroyer Vindex's 4-inch guns swiftly destroyed U-463, ending the boat's fleeting existence in minutes. The attack claimed the lives of 46 men from the submarine's crew, with only 3 managing to survive the sinking. Not long after, on May 6, another tragic episode unfolded involving U-192, commanded by Captain Oeloant Vera. This submarine was subjected to a prolonged 6-hour hunt by escorts from convoy SC-129. Demonstrating remarkable resilience, the boat dove to an astounding 300 meters, far beyond its designed operational depth. The hull groaned and creaked under the immense pressure, developing leaks in dozens of places, yet the sonar operators aboard the escort ships continued their dogged pursuit. The coordination among the Allied escorts was flawless. One maintained continuous contact with ASDIC, sonar, while others positioned carefully for depth charge attacks. When the time came for the assault, the depth charges were precisely timed and executed at exactly 300 meters. The intense pressure cracked the submarine's hull, allowing seawater to rush in through numerous breaches. Despite valiant efforts to escape, only 8 men survived the sinking. The remaining 40 perished beneath the crushing depths of the Atlantic. Adding to the toll, U-531, a newly commissioned vessel on her maiden patrol, was ambushed on May 6 by a Royal Air Force Liberator aircraft equipped with airborne radar. The aircraft, employing its advanced sensors, surprised the submarine on the surface during the night, an occurrence previously considered unlikely, met relentless pursuit in the vast stretches of the Atlantic. The once formidable stealth of the German U-boats had been drastically compromised. Now, every move was shadowed by the relentless eyes of advanced Allied technology. The attack that finally decimated the fleet was often carried out in deadly coordination, leaving no survivors in its wake, an uncompromising onslaught that left the sea littered with wreckage and silence. The list of lost vessels grew daily. U-194, U-125, U-438, U-657, U-273, and countless others. Some submarines were obliterated outright by swift, precise aircraft swooping in from the skies. Others fell victim to aggressive surface escorts that closed in with calculated aggression. Many boats were hunted down through expertly executed tactics that combined air and surface forces, working together in seamless synchronization. Yet, for the majority of these submarines, detection had often happened first, not through direct contact but via radar or sonar signals that betrayed their hidden presence beneath the waves. This shift in technological dominance was so profound that it had rendered German submarines nearly helpless in the face of modern Allied detection methods. For those crews still at sea during what became known as Black May, the psychological toll was overwhelming. Constantly receiving radio messages about vessels that had vanished without a trace, they experienced a growing sense of despair and helplessness. Their friends, their comrades, and their classmates, everyone was being swallowed by the depths, lost in the cold, relentless ocean that had once been the German hunting ground. Now, it was transformed into a lethal killing field where the submarines themselves became prey. The atmosphere aboard was punctuated by the unending sound of pinging sonar, fatal signals that offered no refuge, only the certainty of imminent danger. Sonar pulses, which once served as vital tools for detection, now made hiding virtually impossible. They crackled through the water, pinpointing even the most well-concealed submarines, leaving them no place to retreat. In an effort to maintain operational effectiveness despite these overwhelming odds, Submarine Command issued orders rooted in denial and perseverance. Despite the mounting losses, Berlin insisted that these setbacks were only temporary, mere blips on the wider strategic radar that would soon favor the U-boats again. New tactics and strategies echoed across command radios, aimed at encouraging the crews to hold their ground and believe in a forthcoming reversal of fortune. They received directives to persevere, promised that the tide would eventually turn back in their favor. Yet, the men aboard the submarines, those for whom the reality was painfully clear, knew all too well the true nature of their predicament. They had experienced the relentless tracking by the Allied Aztec systems, which relentlessly pursued their vessels across the depths. They had survived depth charge attacks that seemed to seek them out with ruthless precision, explosions that cracked the hulls and threatened destruction. They had watched countless companions perish beneath those deadly detonations, their submarines succumbing under the weight of perfectly placed explosives. No amount of propaganda could erase those haunting memories. Oberleutnant Wehrer, who was now commanding his own vessel, U-415, at this point in the war, directly confronted these harsh realities firsthand. His memoirs detail a patrol undertaken in April of 1943, painting a stark picture of their perilous existence. Wehrer recounted that shortly after they had reached their designated operational zone, they were detected, within mere hours. For 3 relentless days, they were hunted by Allied escorts whose sonar kept their vessels in constant pursuit, refusing to lose contact. Desperation rose as the crew tried to evade their pursuers, diving to their maximum depth of approximately 300 meters. Their hulls creaked under the immense pressure, rivets popped, a testament to the perilous depths they dared to venture into. Despite their efforts to escape, the relentless pinging continued unabated. When surface darkness presented a potential means of escape, they faced yet another threat. Allied aircraft appeared overhead, equipped with powerful searchlights and sensitive radar, which had already detected their signals before they had the chance to spot the planes. With no safe haven left, Wehrer's submarine had to dive again, racing against time to avoid destruction. Their submerged escape was narrowly successful. Only by retreating to the depths could they evade immediate detection. Even then, danger persisted. The submarine endured a series of depth charge attacks, culminating in the stern being hit. A blow that damaged the stern torpedo tube but left the boat still functioning, still fighting. For 60 hours afterward, the crew of U-415 continued to face the relentless pursuit through the treacherous waters of the Atlantic. They knew the war had shifted. The silent and fearful days of the U-boat campaign were waning, replaced by this unyielding, modern form of underwater warfare where technological superiority dictated the outcome. By April 15, after journeying through the hostile waters of the Bay of Biscay, Wehrer's vessel finally cleared the perilous crossing into open Atlantic waters. Yet, their relief was only fleeting. 5 submarines remained submerged, their electric motors humming softly as they continued to drift away from the patrol zone, creeping along at a meager pace of about 3 knots. Commander Wehrer was acutely aware that the Allied hunter-killer groups operated with precision and coordination, their patrol patterns meticulously planned to detect and neutralize enemy submarines. He knew that any aircraft detection or sonar contact could swiftly trigger surface escorts to race toward their location, eager to strike. On the morning of April 18, this alarm finally went off. The Aztec sonar signals began echoing through the tight confines of the U-boat's hull, piercing the silence with sharp, repetitive pings. It was clear that an escort had picked up their trail and was actively tracking them. In response, Wehrer carefully descended to a depth of 250 meters, aiming to reduce their acoustic signature, and shifted to silent running mode. Yet, despite these measures, the sonar pings persisted, echoing relentlessly through the water. The escort's contact was strong and consistent, holding onto their position for hour after hour with unwavering steadiness. Veerer employed every evasive maneuver at his disposal, altering the submarine's course by a full 90 degrees in hopes of throwing off the tracking. However, the pings continued to follow as though no change had been made. At one point, he briefly increased the boat's speed, hoping to create confusion, then slowed again, in an attempt to deceive the operator. But the intensity of the pings grew, indicating the escort was tightening its pursuit, gradually closing the distance. In a desperate bid to evade, Veerer released a decoy capsule and a bubble decoy system, designed to mimic the submarine's acoustic signature and divert the escort's attention. Still, the sonar returns remained unwavering, revealing the seasoned operator's skill in distinguishing genuine submarine echoes from the decoys. The hours stretched on as the relentless pursuit dragged into the night, with no relief in sight. Soon, deadly depth charges rained down upon them. The patterns proved alarmingly accurate, detonating precisely at their current depth of 250 meters, the very depth at which U-415 was now operating. The pressure was overwhelming. Veerer ordered the boat to go even deeper, to 300 meters, hoping to avoid the attacks. Beneath this crushing pressure, the hull groaned ominously, paint flaking from the bulkheads as the strain increased. The crew, faces chalk white with fear, remained rigid at their stations, aware that the slightest mistake might bring catastrophe. The attack raged on through the long hours of darkness and into the following day. Exhaustion seeped into every crew member. They were pushed to their limits, physically and mentally drained. Meanwhile, the battery reserves dwindled perilously low, and the air quality inside the confined confines had become dangerously poor. Veerer faced an agonizing decision. Risk surfacing to engage the escort, which would almost certainly result in their destruction under the withering fire, or stay submerged, conserving energy but risking the eventual depletion of their batteries and the certainty of surrender if they could not surface. Alternatively, they could wait, holding out, hoping that the escort would run low on fuel or exhaust its depth charges, allowing them a slim chance to survive. Veerer made the difficult choice to remain hidden beneath the ocean's surface. For 16 harrowing hours, U-415 moved silently through the depths while death circled like a vulture overhead. Finally, the relentless pinging ceased. The escort had exhausted its supply of depth charges and withdrew. Veerer waited cautiously for several additional hours, watching the now quiet sea, before surfacing. When he did, the waters stretched before him, the vast ocean appearing deserted, empty of any sign of the enemy. In a battered state, the submarine limped back toward the French coast, their mission abruptly terminated. The crew, scarred by the ordeal, were left forever changed by the harrowing experience. U-415 would never undertake another wartime patrol. Instead, she was lost in her underground berth at Toulon, bombed and sunk during an Allied air raid in July of the year 1944. Commander Veerer survived solely because he was ashore during the attack. His escape was pure luck amid a growing technological disparity. By the middle of 1943, Allied escort ships had become significantly more advanced, armed not only with improved sonar systems but with a comprehensive anti-submarine warfare network. High-frequency direction-finding equipment, known as HFDUF by operators, could triangulate radio transmissions from submarines in real time, greatly enhancing detection. Radar systems, operational in conditions of night or fog, could locate surfaced submarines at considerable distances. Meanwhile, aircraft equipped with sonobuoys created underwater listening networks, covering extensive areas, turning vast oceanic spaces into monitored zones. Surface combatants also employed forward-throwing weapons like the Hedgehog and Squids, which projected patterns during the ongoing naval confrontations. Escort carriers played a crucial role by providing essential air cover that protected the convoy from aerial threats. Previously, the so-called Mid-Atlantic Gap, an area situated far beyond the effective reach of any aircraft, had posed a significant danger, allowing submarines like U-boat to operate unchallenged and beyond the effective strike radius of patrol planes. However, this gap was eventually eliminated via the deployment of exceptionally long-range Liberator bombers, flying from bases in Newfoundland and Northern Ireland. These aircraft could cover vast oceanic distances and maintain persistent surveillance, ensuring that no submarine could slip openly into the open waters without being detected. Every square mile of ocean that the convoy traversed was meticulously monitored through an extensive network of overlapping sensor systems, ranging from sonar, radar, to various other detection devices, creating an almost impenetrable barrier designed to catch and neutralize submarine threats. When a submarine, such as U-boat, approached a convoy, the outcome was almost always predictable. Detection was nearly unavoidable. If the submarine transmitted radio signals to communicate or coordinate with other subs, the process known as Huff-Duff triangulation could quickly pinpoint its location, prompting escorts to rapidly converge upon the area. Conversely, if the submarine surfaced at night to shadow the convoy, radar systems would detect its silhouette against the dark sea, and aircraft would be dispatched to attack with coordinated precision. Approaching the convoy underwater was also fraught with peril for submarines. When operating submerged, the vessel relied on its sonar system, like ASDICH, to detect targets. However, this approach still carried significant risks. Typically, the submarine faced three undesirable options: remain at a safe distance where it could not mount an attack, surface covertly at night to attempt shadowing the convoy but risk being spotted and destroyed by aircraft, or close the distance underwater, an extremely dangerous maneuver that could expose it to destruction by escort ships with depth charges and anti-submarine weapons. Each option carried grave risks, and none assured success. The advent of the Hedgehog weapon system marked a revolutionary shift in anti-submarine warfare tactics. Prior to its introduction, depth charge attacks required escorts to pass directly over the submarine, dropping a series of explosive charges behind or beneath the target. This method was inherently risky because, in the final moments of the attack, contact with the submarine could be lost, often resulting in wasted effort without a confirmed kill. The Hedgehog system changed this dynamic dramatically. It fired 24 small, forward-facing bombs arranged in an elliptical pattern, maintaining contact with the target via sonar throughout the attack run. Each bomb was armed with 35 pounds of Torpex explosive, triggered by contact with a hard surface, like the hull of a submarine. The beauty of this system was its ability to provide instant feedback to the attacking escort. If all 24 bombs missed, they would sink harmlessly to the ocean floor, leaving the escort free to immediately launch another pattern of projectiles, potentially neutralizing the threat with relentless precision. However, if even one bomb struck the submarine's hull, it would detonate, causing a chain reaction that could explode adjacent bombs, unleashing a devastating blast capable of cracking the pressure hull and ending the submarine's threat altogether. Such attacks inflicted both physical damage and severe psychological stress on German submarine commanders, who quickly learned to dread Hedgehog assaults. Unlike traditional depth charges, which exploded whether they hit or missed, the Hedgehog system provided direct feedback. Silence indicated a missed opportunity, while explosions signified a successful hit, almost always fatal. The devastating effectiveness of hedgehog attacks set the stage for even more advanced weaponry, such as the squid system, which was introduced toward the end of 1943. The squid was an even more sophisticated and lethal weapon, employing 3 large mortars that discharged patterns of 3 depth charges each, set to explode at predetermined depths. These depths weren't randomly chosen. They were precisely calculated by an onboard automatic computer, which processed data from the ASDIC sonar system. This allowed the system to adapt dynamically, even accounting for evasive maneuvers by the target submarine, by predicting the position of the vessel when the charges reached their designated depth. The effectiveness of the squid system was remarkably higher than that of traditional depth charges. Frigates equipped with squid achieved a kill rate of approximately 1 in 4 attacks, a stark contrast to the less than 1 in 20 success rate typically seen with conventional depth charge methods. German countermeasures, designed to deceive and evade such sonar-guided weaponry, proved to be largely ineffective. For instance, devices like the Pillenwerfer, a chemical-based decoy that generated bubble streams intended to mimic the echo signature of a submarine, only fooled inexperienced sonar operators. Instead, seasoned ASDIC operators soon learned to differentiate the chaotic, bubbly echo signature of decoys from the solid return associated with a steel hull. With training and experience, these expert operators could reliably ignore such decoys within seconds, rendering these attempts at deception largely futile. In summary, technological advances such as a vastly more sophisticated and convincing decoy was developed in hopes of misleading enemy sonar and detection systems. This particular device involved a 1-meter-long balloon, coated carefully with thin aluminum strips to give it a reflective surface, and filled with calcium hydride. The balloon was designed to ascend slowly from the depths of the ocean. As it reached shallower waters, the seawater would react with the calcium hydride inside, generating hydrogen gas in the process. This chemical reaction allowed the balloon to achieve a state of neutral buoyancy, enabling it to mimic the gentle, constant movement of a submarine snorkel. To radar systems, this inflated device appeared convincingly similar to a real snorkel periscope breaking through the water's surface, thus acting as an effective decoy against detection. For the ASDIC sonar system, this underwater illusion produced a valid echo, supporting the notion that it was a genuine submarine. However, the countermeasure known as BOLD had significant limitations that curtailed its strategic value. Notably, it could only be deployed from stationary submarines, limiting its functionality in real combat scenarios. Its ascent was too slow to offer effective protection during rapid evasive maneuvers, and it lacked the capability to move horizontally, which would be essential for proper deception during dynamic submarine tactics. Consequently, any ASDIC operator who maintained contact with the target for more than a few minutes would probably discern that the contact was not a real submarine. Their suspicions could be confirmed if they recognized the inability of the decoy to maneuver or if they detected inconsistencies in the sonar echoes. Over the years, extensive research was undertaken into absorbent hull coatings designed to diminish sonar reflection. These coatings aimed to make submarines less detectable by absorbing incoming sonar pulses rather than reflecting them back to the sonar source. Despite promising laboratory results, such coatings were never successfully deployed in operational conditions. The Germans, intrigued by this concept, named their most ambitious attempt Alberic, after the dwarf in Wagner's operatic cycle who possessed an invisibility cloak. The basic idea was straightforward. By applying a rubber coating impregnated with countless tiny air bubbles, a submarine's hull could absorb sonar signals, thus making it invisible to detection. Laboratory experiments demonstrated promising results, but moving from controlled settings to the unpredictable conditions of the open ocean proved exceedingly difficult. One of the primary issues was the thickness required for the coating to be effective. It needed to be several centimeters thick, which added significant weight to the vessel, thereby affecting its maneuverability and speed. Additionally, the coating degraded rapidly in seawater, losing its absorbent qualities over time. Most critically, it could not withstand the extreme pressure changes experienced during deep dives. At greater depths, the coating would compress under pressure, diminishing its sound-absorbing properties, and upon surfacing, it would expand irregularly. This expansion often resulted in gaps or tears, exposing the submarine to detection. After months of rigorous testing on captured U-boat vessels, the Allied forces collectively concluded that Alberic was ultimately ineffective and unfeasible for operational use. The German scientists, despite having far fewer resources than their Allied counterparts, reached the same conclusion. Their core problem was rooted in strategic misjudgment. For 2 decades, German engineering efforts were predominantly focused on developing advanced pro-submarine technologies. They improved the capabilities of their U-boat detection systems, notably the U-boat, which excelled at locating enemy vessels. However, they smothered the development of countermeasures, ignoring the emerging necessity for anti-submarine defenses. When Allied detection technologies matured, Germany found itself disastrously unprepared with effective countermeasures, leading to a strategic and technological disadvantage at a critical juncture of the war. The Naval Command believed incorrectly that future naval warfare would mirror past conflicts, where submarines primarily relied on stealth and deception in relatively predictable operational environments. They had prepared to fight the last war, investing heavily in offensive submarine capabilities, while neglecting to develop robust anti-detection tactics and countermeasures. Meanwhile, the Allies had aggressively advanced a spectrum of new technologies, transforming undersea warfare into an entirely different domain, characterized by intense radar, sonar, and electronic countermeasures. This technological gap resulted in a horrifying toll on the German submarine crews. The human costs escalated at an alarming rate, with mounting casualties and declining morale. By September of the year 1942, approximately 3,000 men, forming the backbone of the U-boat operational force, were at sea in active, combat-ready submarines, confronting the relentless Allied advancements. Less than 2 years later, in August of the year 1944, nearly 28,000 of the 40,000 personnel who had served in the U-boat fleet had been killed. The survival rate for submarine crews plummeted below 30%, converting nearly every patrol into a near-certain death sentence. Despite the catastrophic losses, the German Kriegsmarine continued dispatching submarines, even as new, inexperienced crews replaced the seasoned commanders who had led early wartime successes. The strain on the crews was we find ourselves navigating in what can only be described as steel coffins, submarines that, despite their lethal potential, are inherently vulnerable and precariously balanced between stealth and exposure. The advent of snorkel technology in the middle of 1944 brought a flicker of renewed hope to the crews of these underwater vessels. This extendable breathing apparatus, essentially a telescoping tube, was designed to allow submarines to breathe and run their diesel engines while remaining submerged, at least partially. By extending above the water's surface, it meant that ships could, in theory, stay underwater for extended periods during their patrols without needing to surface entirely. However, this promising innovation was short-lived in its promise of safety and concealment. Allied radar systems, ever evolving and increasingly sophisticated, quickly adapted to detect even the tiniest protrusions, like the snorkel head, above the waterline. Whether submerged with the snorkel extended or running solely on batteries, the submarines remained vulnerable to the relentless advances in sonar technology and radar detection techniques. This technological cat-and-mouse game defined much of the underwater warfare in this era, highlighting the relentless push and pull between innovation and countermeasures. It is important to note that the basic idea of the snorkel did not originate in Germany. Instead, it was the result of Dutch engineering, captured when German forces occupied the Netherlands in 1940. The original Dutch design was simple and clever: a straightforward tube extending above the water surface that delivered air to diesel engines while the submarine maintained a periscope depth. German engineers, however, refined this concept considerably. They incorporated automatic valves into the design, which would seal the tube when waves washed over it, thereby preventing water from flooding the interior. Additionally, exhaust systems were installed to vent diesel fumes underwater, a significant innovation that eliminated the telltale smoke plume, which had previously given away submarines' positions to enemy observers miles away. Despite these advancements, the reality of snorkel operations was grim and grueling. Submarine crews faced a challenging task: maintaining meticulous depth control to keep the snorkel head just above the water's surface. If they sank too deep, the automatic valves would seal shut, causing the diesel engines to draw in air from inside the vessel, an operation that risked internal contamination and machinery failure. Conversely, if they floated too high, the conning tower would breach the waterline, exposing the submarine to detection by aircraft and surface radar systems. Navigating through turbulent seas added another layer of difficulty. Powerful waves would continually wash over the snorkel, causing the automatic valves to open and close erratically, a tortuous cycle that was both noisy and destructive. Every time the valves closed, enormous pressure shifts inside the vessel would occur, resulting in a cacophony of noise that reverberated throughout the submarine. This noise was deafening, as diesel engines ran at full capacity within a submerged environment, an inherently dangerous situation that made normal communication impossible. Crew members found themselves shouting over the deafening roar, their voices barely audible above the din. The relentless vibrations shook every fitting within the boat, making sleep a distant and almost unachievable goal. Despite German engineering efforts to contain the fumes, exhaust gases would occasionally seep into the confined spaces, leading to headaches, nausea, and overall discomfort among the crew members. After enduring these strenuous conditions for approximately 12 hours of snorkeling, a cycle that tested their endurance and resilience, crews would emerge exhausted, ill, and deafened by the relentless noise. The worst part was that snorkeling offered little in the way of genuine invisibility or safety. Allied radar operators, with increasing skill and experience, learned how to detect snorkel heads with remarkable reliability. Although the silhouette of the small snorkel was difficult to distinguish, aircraft equipped with advanced radar systems could identify returns from the tube, especially when the sea was calm. Strategic reconnaissance airplanes would then attack the submerged or partially submerged vessel with depth charges or homing torpedoes, effectively forcing the submarine to dive deeper or retreat entirely, often cutting short vital battery charging cycles. Furthermore, some submarines were caught while snorkeling by surface escorts. These escorts had become highly adept at identifying the acoustic signatures produced by running diesel engines or the wake left in the water by the snorkel tube slicing through the surface. The acoustic evidence provided a reliable means of detection, often leading to the destruction of the submarine before it could complete its mission. As the war progressed, Allied operators honed their skills in distinguishing true submarine contacts from false echoes, thanks in large part to rigorous training programs that produced thousands of highly skilled sonar operators, capable of reading and interpreting subtle underwater signals with exceptional accuracy. Using sophisticated target characteristic analysis, Allied sonar operators could estimate the specific type of submarine from its echo signatures. They were capable of tracking evasive maneuvers with remarkable accuracy and guiding weapons with lethal precision. This advanced combination of cutting-edge technological equipment paired with highly trained personnel resulted in a detection network so comprehensive and effective that German submarines found it nearly impossible to evade it. To achieve such expertise, British and American naval training establishments standardized what was known as ASDIC instruction, which involved weeks of intense classroom learning. During these sessions, trainee operators immersed themselves in the fundamentals of acoustic physics, understanding how sound propagates through water and how fluctuations in temperature and salinity influence sonar beams. They studied in detail how submarine hulls reflect sound waves, learning to differentiate these echoes from other underwater noises. Part of their training involved analyzing recordings of real submarine echoes, which helped in developing the skill needed to distinguish a submarine from natural oceanic noises such as whales, shipwrecks, schools of fish, and thermal layers that could mask or mimic submarine signals. Trainees practiced on sophisticated simulators that recreated various hunting scenarios, accelerating their ability to recognize signs in real time, which was crucial during combat situations. By the year of 1944, the navies of Britain and America had graduated a new generation of ASDIC operators whose skills vastly surpassed those of the pioneering crews who initially developed these tactics through trial, error, and on-the-spot experimentation during the early stages of the war. These operators took pride in their craft, and there was a sense of professionalism and camaraderie that fueled their competitive spirit. They vied to achieve faster detection times, longer-lasting contact tracking, and higher success rates in launching attack solutions. The Royal Navy notably published monthly performance tables that ranked ASDIC teams based on their detection and tracking capabilities, fostering a culture of excellence. The top operators earned promotions and decorations, and their reputation grew into legend. Tales circulated of operators who could identify different submarine types by subtle variations in their echo signatures, who could track evasive submarines through shifts in temperature layers, and who could maintain contact without losing it once detection was first achieved. By the time of the Normandy landings on June 6, 1944, the Battle of the Atlantic had been decisively won in favor of the Allies. During that historic invasion day, not a single Allied vessel was lost to German U-boats amidst the massive naval assault on the beaches, despite the desperate German efforts to disrupt the cross-channel traffic. The sonar screens maintained by Allied escort ships were so effectively managed that any submarines attempting to approach the invasion fleet on June 6 were detected immediately and either driven away or destroyed before they could fire their torpedoes. While some U-boats did manage to sink ships in the days and weeks following the initial landings, the core invasion fleet successfully crossed the channel without being attacked by submarines during the critical initial phase. Admiral Karl Donitz had issued an order for every available U-boat to attack the invasion fleet, deploying perhaps 36 submarines into the English Channel and the surrounding approaches. Yet this mission was fundamentally suicidal, and everyone involved knew it. The shallow waters of the Channel limited submarine maneuverability, and the Allied air dominance was absolute, with hundreds of aircraft patrolling constantly overhead. Furthermore, the surface escorts, numbering in the hundreds, created overlapping sonar coverage, ensuring there were no unprotected gaps where submarines could approach unseen. Despite these overwhelming defenses, the order persisted. to attack the invasion fleet regardless of the enormous risks involved. Submarines equipped with snorkel devices, which allowed them to operate closer to the surface while submerged, fared slightly better than those without. One notable example was U-84, commanded by Uloit Hinda, which managed to penetrate close enough to the invasion beaches on June 8 to launch torpedoes at landing craft. The submarine survived this attack and withdrew, though the relentless Allied sonar and air coverage soon forced other U-boats to retreat or be destroyed. This intense anti-submarine effort, driven by technology, training, and strategic planning, helped ensure the success of the Normandy invasion and marked a turning point in the naval aspects of the conflict. The intense and relentless use of tracking technology combined with aggressive depth charging procedures inflicted severe damage upon the German U-boats during the Normandy invasion period. Among them, U-984 stand out as one of the very few submarines that managed to launch successful attacks against invasion shipping and, remarkably, survived to recount the harrowing experiences. The vast majority of the boats, despite their valiant efforts, were far less fortunate, falling victim to the overwhelming Allied anti-submarine tactics. On the 9th of June, U-55, a German submarine, was detected by the Australian destroyer Hulstead using its ASDIC system while attempting to clandestinely approach the invasion fleet. Once the contact was confirmed, the frigate maintained its position, tracking the submarine meticulously for an astonishing 11 hours. Throughout this period, U-55 attempted to evade detection by diving deeply into the ocean's darkened depths and adopting a silent running approach, but the Type 147 ASDIC continued to track it with precision in all three spatial dimensions. As the frigate's onboard depth charges began to run low, it called in reinforcements, prompting the arrival of the destroyer Eskimo, which then took over the pursuit. Eskimo launched an attack employing squid mortars, a type of anti-submarine weapon that released rapid, coordinated depth charges designed to cripple the submarine. The second wave of attack struck U-55 amidships, tearing into its pressure hull and causing catastrophic damage. The submarine, unable to withstand the relentless assault, sank swiftly, taking all 48 crew members with it into the abyss. 12 hours later, on June 10, U-821 became the target of a prolonged hunt by multiple escort vessels that had been directed to locate and destroy it. Despite the submarine's calculated evasive maneuvers, including diving to depths of approximately 300 meters, deploying bold decoys to mislead the escorts, and executing erratic course changes, nothing could shake the relentless pursuit. The ASDIC contact remained unbroken, a piercing reminder of the vulnerability of these stealthy vessels. As the submarine's batteries neared depletion and fresh air became scarce and nearly unbreathable, Captain Lieutenant Ulrich Knackfuss made the desperate decision to surface and surrender to the Allied forces. The rescue operations saved 37 survivors, but sadly, 12 sailors had already lost their lives during the brutal depth charge attacks. The attritional vigilant combat persisted through the months of June and July. Out of the 36 German U-boats committed to attacking the Allied invasion force, 25 were destroyed, translating into a staggering loss rate of 69% within just 2 months. The surviving submarines, severely damaged and psychologically scarred by their encounters, limped back to French ports, disfigured, battered, and carrying the heavy weight of defeat. Despite their losses, not a single troop ship or major warship was sunk. Only a handful of small landing craft and minor vessels were hit, but at a heavy toll, costing hundreds of lives of German submariners and dozens of invaluable submarines. The seafloor off the Normandy coast became increasingly littered with the wrecks of German U-boats, a somber graveyard of technology and lives. Post-war surveys conducted by Allied forces would eventually identify 17 wrecked U-boats in the invasion area, most bearing clear evidence of catastrophic depth charge damage. These wrecks served as underwater memorials, stark reminders of the futility of deploying submarines against an enemy that wielded absolute mastery of sonar and radar technology. The Germans' last-ditch effort to regain underwater dominance came in the final months of the war with the introduction of the Type 21 Elektrobot submarine, a revolutionary design aimed at restoring their submerged prowess. These advanced submarines boasted streamlined hulls, massive battery capacities, and sophisticated acoustic noise mitigation features. Their design allowed for sustained submerged speeds of up to 17 knots, significantly faster than the earlier models, and included acoustically quieting technologies that made them more elusive targets. Had the Type 21 boats been available in larger numbers and in earlier years, they might have had a decisive impact on the outcome of these naval confrontations. Regrettably, only 2 of these pioneering Type 21 submarines managed to complete combat patrols before Germany surrendered. Their late arrival and limited numbers rendered them almost irrelevant to the overall course of the war. This class of submarine represented a radical departure from the traditional design of earlier U-boat models. Previously, these vessels primarily operated on the surface, capable of submerging temporarily for stealth or evasion but mainly functioning as surface ships. In contrast, the Type 21 was designed to operate primarily underwater as a true submarine, surfacing only when absolutely necessary. The hull of the Type 21 was streamlined for maximum hydrodynamic efficiency, resembling a torpedo in shape, with a clean, smooth surface that eliminated external protrusions such as deck guns and external torpedo storage. These modifications minimized drag, enabling higher speeds and greater maneuverability beneath the waves. This innovative, hydrodynamic design, the Type 21 submarine represented a remarkable leap forward in underwater warfare technology, boasting specifications that were truly impressive for its time. Capable of maintaining a submerged speed of 17 knots for a continuous 90-minute period, it showcased enhanced performance that set it apart from earlier designs. When traveling at a more modest cruising speed of around 6 knots, the vessel could stay submerged for up to 3 days without the need to surface, affording it unprecedented operational endurance. Additionally, the submarine was designed to reach depths of 280 meters, a depth far exceeding the typical setting of Allied depth charges, which meant it could operate deeper in pursuit of stealth and safety. One of the most groundbreaking innovations introduced with the Type 21 was its hydraulic torpedo reload system. Unlike traditional submarines, which could only fire a limited number of torpedoes before needing to surface or undergo lengthy reloading procedures, the Type 21 could fire all 6 torpedoes from its bow, then quickly reload all 6 and fire again, all in less than 20 minutes, while still remaining at action stations and fully prepared for combat. This rapid-fire capability represented a significant tactical advantage, allowing the submarine to sustain offensive operations without returning to base or surfacing. German engineers had also paid considerable attention to improving sonar detection resistance, which was a persistent challenge for underwater vessels. The hull of the Type 21 was coated with synthetic rubber tiles, engineered specifically to absorb and dampen the pulses from the active sonar systems like the ASDITCH, thereby reducing the chances of detection. The propellers were carefully designed to minimize cavitation noise, effectively making the submarine quieter and more elusive. Furthermore, the machinery aboard was mounted on rubber isolators, a system intended to suppress the vibrations transmitted through the hull, further decreasing the acoustic signature. The snorkel system, critical for running diesel engines while submerged, received notable enhancements, featuring improved valves and more efficient airflow management, adding to the vessel's overall stealth and operational efficacy. Theoretically, these advancements made the Type 21 much harder to detect and track than traditional conventional submarines. Construction of the Type 21 began toward the end of 1943 and employed prefabrication techniques that were modeled closely on American shipbuilding practices. This modular approach involved fabricating 8 sections in different manufacturing plants across Germany. These sections were transported to assembly yards where they were rapidly combined into complete submarines. By adopting this method, the Germans aimed to accelerate production amid wartime pressures. Before the war concluded, a total of 118 Type 21 submarines had been completed, with 4 of these reaching operational status and ready for combat. However, the ambitious program was hampered by numerous issues that emerged from the rushed development process and the scattered nature of manufacturing. The quality control measures were often inadequate, resulting in sections that did not align properly during assembly. Welds frequently cracked under pressure, electrical systems proved unreliable, and the hydraulic torpedo reloading system suffered from persistent leaks. Perhaps most critically, the rubber coating intended to mitigate sonar detection proved to be an unreliable feature. It degraded rapidly in seawater, peeled off during deep dives, and under certain conditions, actually increased the submarine's acoustic signature instead of diminishing it, thus making detection easier. Amidst these problems, U-2511, commanded by the distinguished corvetting-captain Adalbert Schnee, was the only vessel to undertake a genuine combat patrol in the Type 21 class. It set out from Bergen, Norway, on the 30th of April, 1945, just days before Germany's surrender. The orders for Schnee's patrol were explicitly designed to demonstrate the new submarine's capabilities by attempting to penetrate well-defended Allied patrol lines and reaching the open waters of the North Atlantic. For a duration of 2 weeks, U-2511 operated off the British Isles, successfully evading numerous Allied anti-submarine efforts. During this patrol, Schnee detected several potential targets but refrained from attacking, adhering strictly to orders to avoid engagement unless the situation was unequivocally favorable. This cautious approach was a testament to the respect and understanding of the vulnerabilities of the Type 21. Even with its advanced design, it still faced significant detection risks. The patrol ultimately showcased both the strengths and shortcomings of the vessel. While its remarkable underwater speed and endurance allowed it to outrun escorts when detected, it remained vulnerable to the Allies' evolving sonar techniques. The Allied operators quickly adapted their tactics to the new acoustic signatures emitted by the Type 21, which meant that on multiple occasions, they gained solid contact and initiated active pursuit. Yet, the submarine's superior underwater speed often enabled it to break contact and escape detection before being overwhelmed. The patrol report filed by Schnee after Germany's surrender summed up the experience with candid analysis. Although the Type 21 marked a substantial improvement over conventional submarines, particularly in terms of speed, endurance, and firepower, it was still hindered by material shortcomings and the ongoing challenge of sonar evasion, shortcomings that made the submarine's ultimate success in wartime conditions uncertain at best. The German submarine U-30008, the sole other vessel of the Type 21 class to complete a full combat patrol, proved to be no match for Allied sonar detection systems. Unlike what German propaganda had claimed, the Type 21 did not possess the kind of invisibility that would render it undetectable to Allied forces. Over time, It was inevitable that the Allies would refine their tactics and develop new technologies to locate and neutralize these advanced submarines. U-30,008's record in wartime was, therefore, rather unimpressive. Its fleeting operational achievements did little to alter the course of the naval conflict. This particular submarine set sail from Kiepenkerl on May 1 of the year 1945, with a mission to evacuate German personnel from Norway in the final days of the war. Yet, by May 9, after a swift and mostly uneventful journey, the vessel surrendered unconditionally to the Allied forces, having not fired a single shot in anger. The surrender marked the end of its brief wartime service, but it was merely the beginning of the vessel's post-war story. After the war, British and American naval analysts conducted thorough inspections of the submergible's design and construction. Their examinations uncovered the numerous flaws and quality control issues that had plagued the German program from the outset. The rubber coating applied to the hull, intended as a stealth feature, was peeling in multiple spots, undermining its stealth capabilities. Hydraulic systems, essential for maneuvering and control, were leaking fluid, compromising operational reliability. Corrosion had compromised electrical connections, increasing the risk of system failures at critical moments. Despite being technically operational, the boat fell far short of the revolutionary weapon that German propaganda had promised to the world. Less the super shark of the seas and more a reminder of hurried, imperfect engineering. For the crews of the German submarines who survived the war, the one recurring nightmare remained the sound of sonar pings striking their hulls. Veterans often recalled the metallic ringing of the echo-ranging signals, a shrill and persistent noise that grew louder as escort ships drew nearer. This sound signified the death knell of their once feared stealth. Where once they had been hunters in the vast ocean, now they knew they were the hunted. The deafening signals marked a turning point. No longer invincible, German submarines became vulnerable targets, systematically hunted down and destroyed. The era of submarine invincibility was conclusively over. One of the few surviving commanders of the Type 21 submarines, Herbert Vera, later emigrated to the United States in 1957 and became a naturalized American citizen. He authored a memoir titled Iron Coffins in 1969, a poignant reflection of his wartime experiences. The dedication of his book reads, "To my fallen comrades who rest in iron coffins at the bottom of the sea." In his writing, Vera admitted a truth that had taken him years to accept, that the Germans' defeat was not solely due to bravado or numerical superiority, although these factors played their roles. Rather, it stemmed from the technological innovations of their enemies, technologies that they had failed to understand or counter. The Allies had developed the ability to see through the watery depths, effectively turning the oceans into a battlefield of sound. The Germans, however, had never succeeded in creating effective concealment techniques. Verer's transformation from a defeated enemy pilot to a proud American citizen encapsulated his personal journey, one marked by war, loss, and eventual rebirth. Following Germany's surrender, Vera spent 2 years imprisoned in British prisoner of war camps. During this period, he served as an interpreter and liaison between Allied authorities and the remaining German naval personnel, leveraging his fluency in English and cooperative attitude to secure an early release in 1947. After his release, he briefly returned to Germany, only to find a nation ravaged. Economically and emotionally, its naval bases in ruins, filled with scuttled submarines, its shores scarred by the scars of war. Most of his comrades had perished, and the once vital submarine service had been dismantled. In 1952, Vera emigrated once again, this time to the United States, arriving on a technical visa sponsored by a marine engineering firm that recognized his expert knowledge in submarine technology. He settled in Connecticut, where he worked as a consultant specializing in sonar systems and underwater acoustics. He was acutely aware of the irony inherent in his new role, helping to perfect the very technology that had defeated Germany's submarine fleet. It was a bitter yet fitting twist of fate, the tools of his defeat transforming into instruments of technological progress that would shape naval warfare for years to come. In 1957, Wehrer formally took the oath of American citizenship, swearing allegiance to the nation whose sonar systems had hunted him through the Atlantic depths. Writing his memoir, Iron Coffins, became a way for Wehrer to process the trauma of war, an act of remembrance for his fallen comrades and a testament to throughout the tumultuous years of military conflict, extensive research, interviews with surviving veterans, consultations of war diaries, and patrol reports formed the backbone of a compelling narrative. This narrative was encapsulated in a memoir published when Ernst Wehrer was just 49 years old. Its immediate impact was striking, an instant bestseller that captivated audiences and critics alike. American readers eagerly absorbed Wehrer's vivid, first-hand recounting of underwater warfare from the perspective of the enemy, offering an unprecedented glimpse into the silent, intimidating world of German submariners. Conversely, many German readers, especially war veterans and those with personal ties to the conflict, received the book with appreciation, valuing it as an honest, unvarnished testimony of their shared experiences during the war's bleak final years. Unlike the often romanticized or propagandistic war literature produced in Germany during that time, works that trivialized or justified Nazi actions, Wehrer's memoir confronted readers with the brutal realities of the submarine war, acknowledging its futility and the horrors endured during the last, desperate phase of the U-boat wars. Despite its widespread acclaim, the memoir's reception was not devoid of criticism. Some German veterans alleged that Wehrer had overstated the technological advantages of Allied sonar systems, suggesting that his depiction exaggerated the enemy's superiority to rationalize Germany's defeat. Meanwhile, a handful of American critics questioned Wehrer's portrayal of his personal achievements, claiming he had perhaps inflated his role or minimized the extent of German war crimes. Such debates fueled discussions among historians and critics, who examined the memoir's details and verified the statistical data. Nevertheless, the core story, the account of German submariners struggling against a formidable Allied sonar technology they could neither evade nor counter, was widely accepted as fundamentally truthful. Throughout the remainder of his life, Wehrer continued to serve as a marine consultant, a role he maintained until he retired in 1985. He occasionally shared his experiences through lectures, particularly at institutions like the Naval War College and the Submarine School, where he contributed to shaping the knowledge of American naval officers about submarine warfare. His engagement extended to participation in numerous historical conferences and documentaries centered on the Battle of the Atlantic, bringing his first-hand insights to a broader audience. In later years, Wehrer became a proponent of reconciliation between Germany and the United States, advocating for improved understanding and cooperation between the two nations. He frequently spoke at veteran organizations, academic institutions, and schools, emphasizing the tragic futility of war and the critical importance of fostering international friendship and peace. The raw statistics surrounding the submarine war tell a stark, sobering story. Out of approximately 1,160 U-boat submarines commissioned by Germany during the Second World War, an estimated 785 were lost in action. The loss of life was staggering, around 30,000 submariners, implying a casualty rate of around 75%, making it the most deadly branch of Germany's military services during that period. The majority of these losses occurred after May of 1943, a turning point coinciding with the maturation of Allied sonar technology and anti-submarine tactics. In the war's final 18 months, deploying a U-boat on patrol was effectively an act of sentencing its crew to death. Among those who survived this brutal conflict was Wolfgang Hirschfeld, a radio operator who had served aboard U-109 during the early years of the war and later aboard U-234, which surrendered in May of 1945. His diaries reveal a grim and poignant perspective. "We who sailed beneath the waves believed ourselves to be invisible warriors. The enemy, however, taught us that invisibility was merely an illusion. Their sonar, relentless and precise, stripped away our sanctuary. Ultimately, we were just men inside steel tubes, waiting for the enemy's pings to find us. And they always did." Hirschfeld's survival was itself remarkable, a rare stroke of luck amid relentless loss. U-234, the submarine on which Hirschfeld served during its final patrol in April of 1945, departed Kiel on a secret mission bound for Japan. The vessel was laden with highly classified cargo, advanced weapon systems, blueprints, technical documents, samples of uranium oxide, and 2 Japanese naval officers. The purpose of this mission was to exchange German technological advancements for vital Japanese resources such as rubber and rare metals. However, history intervened before the submarine could complete its journey. Germany surrendered before U-234 could reach its destination. Captain Lieutenant Fehler, commanding U-234, faced an agonizing choice: surrender to the advancing Americans, continue the voyage toward Japan, or scuttle the vessel to prevent the cargo from falling into Allied hands. The captain ultimately chose to surrender, though the exact reasons and implications of his decision remain a somber subject of historical reflection. Before the destruction of the uranium samples and sensitive classified documents, a notable incident unfolded that would alter many perceptions of wartime events. On May 19 of the year 1945, the submarine U-234 unexpectedly emerged from the depths off the coast of New Hampshire. To the surprise of many, the vessel transmitted a surrender signal to the United States Navy, signaling the end of its wartime patrol and surrendering its crew and cargo. Following this surrender, the destroyer USS Sutton was assigned the critical task of escorting the surrendered submarines safely to the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard. The crew, led by Hirschfeld, became prisoners of war, yet their treatment by American authorities stood out in stark contrast to the brutal protocols often associated with wartime captivity. The Americans displayed a remarkable sense of courtesy and curiosity, especially toward this large, Type 10D cargo submarine and its unusual payload. Hirschfeld himself spent the subsequent 8 months imprisoned in an American POW camp situated in Maryland, where he was afforded humane conditions unlike those experienced by many prisoners in Soviet captivity, conditions that were often characterized by starvation, brutality, and high mortality rates. In contrast to the harsh realities faced by German POWs within the Soviet system, Hirschfeld found the American camp to be a relatively humane environment, providing adequate food, proper medical attention, and respectful treatment. During his time there, he worked as an electrician, repairing radios and assisting with various technical tasks, but also shared knowledge by teaching German to American intelligence officers engaged in preparing for post-war occupation efforts. His release and repatriation to Germany occurred in January the year 1946, marking a significant turning point in his life. When he returned to Hamburg, he was met with devastation. His family's home had been destroyed during Allied bombing raids, a stark symbol of Germany's widespread destruction. His father had been killed in one such raid, while his mother and sister survived but found refuge in a nearby camp for displaced persons, symbolizing the shattered state of German society. The entire country was left in ruins, divided, occupied, and struggling to recover from the relentless devastation wrought by the war. In the aftermath, Hirschfeld undertook various forms of employment, working in electrical repairs, ship maintenance, and serving as a translator for the British occupation forces, struggling to regain stability amid the chaos. During the 1950s, he embarked on a personal project, writing his memoirs, based on a secret diary he had kept throughout the war. This undertaking was driven by a desire to document and reflect on the experiences he and others had endured. His memoir was finally published in Germany in the year 1972, offering the German public a candid, unembellished account of life aboard the U-boat from the perspective of a crew member rather than from a commanding officer. Hirschfeld's detailed diary entries from the years 1942 and 1943 vividly chronicled the evolution of morale within the crew, shifting from initial confidence to growing terror as the Allies' sonar and detection technologies advanced. The early entries painted a picture of successful attacks, daring escapes, and the camaraderie that bonded the crew amidst the dangers of underwater warfare. However, as the war progressed, his writings reflected mounting losses, failed offensive attempts, and the psychological unraveling of men who knew they were being hunted using increasingly sophisticated technology. The final entries from 1945 were marked not by rebellion or defiance but by a sense of resignation, a stark acknowledgement of the inevitable defeat. "We understood," he wrote, "that the war was lost, and that most of us would not survive the final days. Nevertheless, we pressed on, driven by the traditions of our training and the fierce hope that even in a hopeless cause, duty must be fulfilled." The lessons learned about submarine warfare during this period were profound and enduring. The advent of active sonar technology had profoundly transformed naval combat. Oceans that once sheltered submerged vessels now became perilous, revealing their secrets to ever more sensitive detection systems. Every navy across the globe studied the bitter lessons of the Battle of the Atlantic, absorbing the brutal realities of underwater detection and combat. The war prompted a profound shift in submarine technology post-war, with a focus on minimizing acoustic signatures, improving stealth by quieting hull designs, developing coatings that absorbed sonar pulses, and refining propeller shapes to reduce cavitation noise. These innovations aimed to outmatch ever-increasing sonar sensitivities, turning submarine stealth into a sophisticated science. The ongoing battle between underwater detection and stealth tactics marked a new phase in submarine warfare, one that continues to evolve into the present day. Modern naval strategies owe their fundamental principles to the hard-earned lessons learned during the Atlantic Campaign from 1939 to 1945. Every navy invested heavily in quieting technologies, emphasizing hull designs aimed at acoustic invisibility, applying echo-absorbing coatings, and developing propeller systems that produced minimal noise. These advancements created a new era of underwater combat that prioritized concealment and evasion as key to survival under the waves. Mechanical innovations. And during the Cold War era, naval systems were meticulously mounted onto soundproofed, vibration-isolating platforms. The overarching objective remained consistent: to restore the stealth and invisibility that German U-boat crews had lost when Allied sonar technology matured into a formidable detection tool. This relentless pursuit of underwater concealment was driven by the understanding that, in future conflicts, The race between submarine stealth and sonar detection would be decisive in determining naval dominance. In the aftermath of World War II, the Soviet Union managed to capture several Type 21 submarines, along with numerous German engineers who had worked on them. These captured vessels and expertise served as the foundation for the development of the Whiskey-class submarines, which quickly became the backbone of Soviet naval power during the 1950s. Soviet naval architects studied every facet of the German design, paying particular attention to the sophisticated soundproofing techniques. It was evident to them that the key to future underwater warfare lay in the ongoing contest between concealment and detection. To that end, the Soviets incorporated rubber anechoic tiles on the hull, refined propeller designs to reduce noise, and installed machinery isolation and vibration damping systems directly derived from the German Type 21's pioneering technology. Meanwhile, the United States Navy undertook comprehensive testing of the captured U-boat vessels, most notably U-2513 and U-3008, both of which were Type 21 boats surrendered in May of the year 1945. American engineers expressed admiration for several features: the streamlined hull shape, the substantial battery capacity, and the hydraulic systems, elements that significantly influenced subsequent American submarine designs. These innovations culminated in the development of the Tang-class submarines, which marked the United States' first purpose-built post-war submarine fleet. Notably, the Tang class adopted the teardrop hull profile pioneered by German engineers, nearly doubling its underwater speed in comparison to previous wartime fleet boats. The British Royal Navy, eager to understand the capabilities of the Type 21 submarines, conducted exhaustive trials involving U-2511, including tactical exercises against escort groups equipped with the latest active sonar systems, such as the American SQS-4. The findings were sobering. Despite advancements in sonar technology, maintaining contact with the fast, quiet, and deep-diving German vessels proved extraordinarily challenging. These exercises demonstrated vividly that had the Type 21 boats been deployed in significant numbers as early as 1943, they could have posed an acute threat to Allied anti-submarine efforts. This realization profoundly influenced British submarine development over the subsequent decade, leading to the creation of the Porpoise class, which incorporated many features of the German design. On the offensive side of detection technology, sonar systems advanced at a remarkable rate. Passive sonar arrays could now identify submarines from hundreds of miles away, while active sonar systems evolved into multi-frequency configurations capable of defeating most countermeasures. The integration of computer processing allowed for automatic classification of acoustic targets, making sonar systems far more effective and sophisticated. The technological rivalry between submarine stealth and sonar detection capabilities became one of the defining features of Cold War naval strategy, a direct legacy of the intense Battle of the Atlantic. American sonar technology in the 1950s saw revolutionary breakthroughs. The introduction of the SQS-4 sonar in 1952 allowed for target tracking at ranges exceeding 10,000 yards. Variable depth sonar, towed behind surface ships via cables, could be lowered beneath thermal layers, these temperature barriers that often concealed deep-diving submarines from surface sonar. Additionally, networks of sonobuoys deployed from aircraft created acoustic fences across strategic choke points, effectively creating underwater minefields of sound. By the 1960s, U.S. anti-submarine forces had developed detection systems that far surpassed their World War II predecessors, achieving capabilities that were orders of magnitude more sensitive and reliable. In that same period, Soviet submariners found themselves in a predicament strikingly similar to what German U-boat crews had experienced in 1943. They found themselves constantly pursued, hunted by American and Allied sonar systems that had grown exponentially more advanced, making their undersea operations increasingly perilous. Decades ago, underwater sonar technology fundamentally changed the nature of submarine warfare, penetrating what was once considered an almost impenetrable refuge beneath the ocean's surface. During the Cold War era and particularly after it, declassified Soviet naval archives revealed striking insights into the experiences of submarine commanders during the 1960s and 70s. These officers described the relentless psychological toll caused by Western sonar systems with words strikingly similar to those used by German submariners during the Second World War. The constant, rhythmic pinging of active sonar, the unsettling awareness that the enemy was always aware of their precise location, and the helpless sensation of being tracked silently and invisibly beneath the waves profoundly affected the crews caught in this endless technological contest. This ongoing arms race fostered an environment where both superpowers felt compelled to push the boundaries of quieting and detection. As a result, Soviet submarines relentlessly evolved, employing increasingly sophisticated methods to silence their engines and reduce noise through advanced propeller designs, specialized rubber coatings, and cutting-edge propulsion systems that minimized acoustic signatures. Meanwhile, American submarines adopted comparable technological advances, but they also developed even more sensitive passive sonar arrays, capable of detecting distant sounds without emitting their own signals. The race to dominate the underwater domain reached its climax with the advent of nuclear-powered submarines, vessels capable of operating submerged for months on end thanks to their boundless underwater endurance. Yet, despite these technological marvels, no submarine, be it Russian or American, was entirely immune to acoustic detection. The fundamental lesson learned from the historic Battle of the Atlantic remained valid. Sonar's ability to reveal the presence of a submarine shattered the illusion of stealth and invisibility. Regardless of their sophistication, submariners understood that being detected, by active sonar pings or other acoustic signatures, marked the beginning of vulnerability. The sound of active sonar striking a hull, a sharp metallic ping, evoked in crews across all nations, American, British, Soviet, French, and German, the same primal fear. That unmistakable noise signified that the enemy knew their position, was tracking their movements, and could potentially deliver weapons with deadly precision. This psychological impact, rooted in the harrowing experiences of the war years from 1943 to 1945, remained fiercely intact throughout the Cold War. For submarine crews, the danger was tangible and immediate. Detection meant exposure and imminent threat. The haunting sound of active sonar became a universal symbol of peril, eliciting fear not just of immediate attack, but of the underlying vulnerability that came with the underwater invisibility they once believed protected them completely. In one poignant moment of remembrance, in the year 1985, 40 years after the conclusion of the Second World War, a small gathering assembled in the United States. Among them were German submarine veterans, many of whom had served on U-boats long before the war's end, accompanied by some family members. These men, now elders with memories vivid and bittersweet, came together to confront the technology that, decades earlier, had defeated their craft. Herbert Vierer, then aged 75 and having long since made his home in America, sat quietly among the group. As the veterans shared stories, he reflected on their collective experiences. Vierer began to speak softly but with conviction. They had entered the war believing in their invincibility beneath the waves, he explained. Their training had instilled in them the belief that the depths of the ocean safeguarded them implicitly, that submerging equaled disappearing into an impenetrable void. For a time, this belief seemed justified. The silent, expansive ocean seemed to conceal their craft from prying eyes and ears. But everything changed with the appearance of Western sonar technology, particularly the unmistakable metallic ping that struck their hulls repeatedly. That sound shattered their illusions, Veer stated, teaching them a stark truth. The ocean's depths no longer guaranteed concealment. It became a symbol of their newfound vulnerability, and with it came a profound sense of fear that surface sailors could never comprehend. They could not see the enemy, could not engage in combat if detected, and could only await in darkness, helpless, as their adversaries' technology hunted them relentlessly. Their defeat, he explained, was not due to physical weakness but was a consequence of scientific and engineering progress, an arms race that their societies, with their capacity for rapid innovation, ultimately won. The surviving veterans listened in thoughtful silence, comprehending the profound implications of those revelations. A quiet acknowledgement passed among them, recognition of their shared history, of the human cost behind technological progress. German, American, and British veterans, in that moment, connected through a common understanding that no machine could fully eliminate the fundamental vulnerability inherent in submarine warfare. They had been young men, equipped with obsolete submarines, sent against a tide of technological advancement that outstripped their ability to adapt. This collective reflection served as a sober reminder that the core of submarine warfare was never just about machines and tech. It was about fears, uncertainties, and human resilience confronting relentless innovation. The reverberations of those lessons, learned together, they stood united, former enemies now acknowledging a shared reality that had once seemed beyond belief. It was a recognition born out of the stark lessons etched into history by the overwhelming loss of 30,000 submarines resting silently at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. These tragic wrecks served as enduring monuments to a profound truth: that technological superiority, when combined with relentless scientific innovation and robust industrial capacity, could decisively shift the balance of power in naval warfare, overshadowing even courage, skill, and unwavering determination. The evolution of Allied underwater detection capabilities, most famously exemplified by the development of sophisticated sonar systems, stands as one of history's most striking illustrations of how rapidly technological advancements can alter strategic paradigms. At the onset of the Second World War, in the year of its beginning, German submarines, known as U-boats, operated with near invisibility beneath the waves. During this early period, their elusive presence meant that their detection relied heavily on luck, human error, or the occurrence of obvious mistakes. Submarine commanders felt invincible, guided by confidence that the ocean's depths shielded them from permanent detection and destruction. However, that illusion was shattered over the course of just a few years. By the year of the war's midpoint, in 1944, technological progress had rendered submarines increasingly vulnerable. The advent of advanced sonar systems meant that U-boats could be tracked incessantly, their movements mapped with three-dimensional precision, and their locations pinpointed with a lethal degree of accuracy. These innovations effectively eradicated the notion of the underwater sanctuary that had once offered submarines their tactical advantage. This dramatic shift in naval warfare had a profoundly psychological impact on the men operating the submarines. In the initial phases of the conflict, they had entered the war as invisible hunters, confident in their ability to strike unseen and then vanish into the depths. But as the technological revolution unfolded, their role transformed into that of the most wanted prey, a target perpetually detected, relentlessly pursued, stripped of their previously assumed concealment. The haunting sound of sonar pings, echoing through the hulls of these vessels as they navigated the ocean's dark expanses, became the ominous soundtrack of their decline, symbolizing their technological obsolescence. The broader military consequences of this transformation were equally significant. By March of 1943, Britain's vital imports of food and war materiel had plummeted to critically low levels, threatening the very survival of the Allied war effort. Yet, as the technological tide turned against the Germans' U-boat fleet, their effectiveness precipitously collapsed. This decline allowed for a remarkable recovery in supply routes, facilitating the sustained buildup of American forces stationed in Britain in preparation for the historic D-Day invasion, an operation that would be launched from the very shores whose safety had been once threatened by the submarine blockade. The Atlantic supply route, widely regarded by Winston Churchill as perhaps the most frightening challenge faced during the entire war, embodying the nerve-wracking danger of the German naval blockade, became gradually secure as the Allied countermeasures took effect. The Germans' attempt to choke off Britain's lifelines through submarine warfare had ultimately failed, not solely because of depth charges or aerial defenses, but fundamentally due to the advent and deployment of superior sonar technology. This technological breakthrough played a critical role in turning the tide against the U-boat threat. In the final analysis, the saga of German U-boat crews confronting Allied sonar systems is a narrative woven from the threads of technological surprise, relentless adaptation, catastrophic failure, and eventual defeat. At the war's outset, these submariners embarked with justified confidence in their stealth and invisibility beneath the waves. By its conclusion, they had become the most casualty-prone military service of any nation involved, suffering losses that reflected the harsh reality of their circumstances. Between these 2 points, initial confidence and ultimate catastrophe, lay a record of 30,000 individual tragedies. Men who perished in their iron coffins beneath the Atlantic currents, victims of a game-changing technology they could neither understand nor counter. The unassuming yet formidable sound of sonar pings striking steel hulls delivered a stark, simple message: the ocean no longer offered concealment. This profound technological shift underscored a fundamental truth. Surface detection systems had grown powerful enough to reach into the depths where submarines lurked, obliterating the myth of sanctuary. There was no hiding place, no safe haven beneath the waves. For the German submarine crews, this realization arrived far too late to save their lives, yet it was timely enough to influence the doctrines and strategies of submarine warfare for all future generations. Their harrowing experiences, earned at the cost of an astonishing 75% casualty rate, imparted a lasting lesson: that the nature of underwater combat had been irrevocably changed. Invisibility was no longer an inherent trait of submarines. Their detection was now a matter of scientific advancement, precision engineering, and relentless pursuit. The old paradigm of stealth and concealment was giving way to a new reality where beneath the surface, in the realm of modern warfare, the realm of constant and rapid technological evolution, the possibility that one's current dominance may suddenly come to an end is always looming. This very potential, foreseen decades ago by German submarine commanders in the year of 1940, signaled the approaching decline of submarine supremacy. These leaders understood intimately that a single breakthrough, a new detection method or sensor technology, could dismantle the seemingly invincible underwater defenses. The haunting echo of that understanding persists to this day, resonating through every submarine that silently patrols the vast depths of the world's oceans, in every detection system painstakingly designed and deployed to locate them, and within every military doctrine that endeavors either to maintain stealth or to achieve decisive detection. The crews operating those pioneering German U-boat submarines, hopeful yet terrified, were the first to hear the terrifying, metallic ringing that struck their hulls with relentless precision. For them, those sounds were more than mere noise. They were warnings, lessons etched into history at the cost of their lives. Their tragic experience transcends mere defeat, serving as a stark reminder that technological progress can redefine the very nature of combat. These sailors paid with their lives to teach future generations a lesson about the inherent power of science and technology in warfare, a lesson that echoes across the decades. Indeed, technological innovation in warfare advances at a pace surpassing the ability of traditional training, established doctrines, or even the valor of individual soldiers and sailors to keep up. When a new technological shift emerges, those who fail to recognize its significance and adapt accordingly find themselves at a grave disadvantage. Such neglect or ignorance in the face of technological change is not merely a matter of losing a tactical engagement. It often results in catastrophic consequences. Entire campaigns can be lost. Entire wars can turn against those slow to adapt, and, all too frequently, lives are sacrificed in the process, as obsolete strategies become tragic footnotes in the story of progress. Beneath the Atlantic Ocean lie countless sunken vessels, iron coffins, each one bearing silent witness to the peril faced by men who, in their final moments, realized too late that the very ocean they believed to be their sanctuary had been forcibly removed from their grasp by the relentless march of science. These submerged wrecks serve as powerful memorials, reminding us of a fundamental truth of contemporary warfare. Technological superiority often outweighs traditional virtues such as bravery, discipline, or tactical ingenuity. In the high-stakes contest beneath the waves, innovation often decides outcomes more decisively than the skills of individual operators. The development and deployment of advanced Allied sonar technology, an acoustic system capable of detecting the faintest echoes in the darkness, proved far more decisive than the mere deployment of torpedoes or the courage of sailors. It was the key to unraveling the threat of the German U-boat submarines, ultimately rendering them ineffective and securing the Allied hold over the Atlantic. This sonar capability was more than just a detection tool. It was the critical weapon that broke the command and control of the submerged enemy, shifting the balance of power underwater. For the sailors who experienced its persistent pinging, a relentless sequence of sounds echoing through the abyss, it marked a harrowing transformation. From hunters seeking prey to prey themselves, from unseen predators to vulnerable targets exposed by the unyielding march of technological progress. What was once a world of stealth, where submariners moved unseen and undetected, became a nightmare of exposure and vulnerability, driven by an invisible yet omnipresent technological force impossible to outrun or outsmart. In this modern conflict, the victory belongs not to the bravest or the most cunning, but largely to those who master the science of detection and the engineering of silence. Thus, history has recorded that technological mastery, often more than sheer firepower or tactical bravado, ultimately determines the outcome of battles beneath the waves. The relentless pulse of sonar signals, the piercing metallic ringing, serves as a haunting emblem of this truth. In the depths of the ocean, it is science that wields the ultimate power, and those who fail to heed its warning risk not only defeat but their very survival in the unforgiving theater of modern maritime conflict.